And I think it's really amazing if we can stay in a sense of wonder throughout our lives, the way that children, infants do. How can we, in all circumstances, including the dying of loved ones, including whatever is going on with us, remain in the sense of awe and for life, reverence for life, and a wonder of, isn't this an amazing, unique situation? That in itself is something to celebrate.
That's Happy Oasis, and you're listening to the Pure Joy Podcast. Today, we're talking to Happy Oasis. Happy is affectionately called Happy O, is the author of Bliss Conscious Communications, the book that inspired Blissology University, and Uncivilized Ecstasies, Ecstatic Nomadic International Adventure Poetry about the joys of living beyond civilization, which I'm so excited to talk about. And while enjoying an audacious, diversified life, Happy has served as an adventure anthropologist, succulent strategist, ethical advisor, environmental advocate, community solutions leader, eco-entrepreneur, monastic meditation program director, inventor, architectural designer, nonprofit festival producer, poet, performer, editor, volunteer at orphanages, mentor, international wild edible plants, teacher, and wilderness trekking guide. The inspiring story of Happy's name was featured on Oprah, a nomadic ecstatic for 30 plus years. Happy travels as a featured guest speaker at churches, colleges, synagogues, universities, and spiritual centers, including her Heaven on Earth sanctuary situated in a luxurious little-known desert rainforest in a labyrinth of canyons in northern Arizona. And I've been there. It's amazing. As an earth advocate, human rights leader, sleep consultant, fitness friend, songwriter, circle singer, artist, linguist of tribal languages, and blissologist, Happy O is at your service. Welcome, Happy.
Thank you. Wow, it's so wonderful to be in your podcast presence.
Oh, thank you. Oh my God, I loved reading that bio. That was just like, we have so much to talk about. Well, I know when I first met you, it was at Eden Hot Springs back in, I think, the year 2000 or 2001, which is a good 18 years ago. I was working in the kitchen as the main chef in there, and you came in with your little blue bandana, and you were just bringing out the spiritual poetry. Do you remember that? You were just weaving your tales and doing some poetry for us. And that was my introduction to you.
Indeed, kitchen poetry.
I think that's when you had already written your book, Bliss Consciousness, at that point, right?
I did. In fact, it was that year that I had written it. I had just moved back from Australia. No, I was just moving to Australia to finalize it. And then it was printed in China. I moved to China to find out if the inventors of printing were still the leaders in the world 2,500 years later. And I discovered that, yes, in fact, their printing techniques are exquisite and far more advanced than ours here in the USA. So I am so glad to be with you. What I discovered at an early age is gratitude is the precursor to most forms of joy. Of course, there is that moment when somebody receives a gift or maybe some applause or a hug or something. But for the vast majority of us, and perhaps 90% of the time, if we create an attitude of gratitude and gratitude internally, then joy is a byproduct. And so we can create joy without thinking about joy itself, knowing that that's just going to happen on its own accord if we are grateful for all circumstances and all things. And if we aren't grateful, if we say no way, then if I were grateful in the circumstance, what would it be? And if we can't think of anything, then we're not thinking more expansively enough. We could use a little more creativity in our thinking if we cannot think of anything to be grateful for at all. And the wonderful thing is, once we are grateful for one aspect in our life and one aspect about each person we know, some people have a difficulty in being grateful for one person that perhaps is not their most favorite person in the world, but there's always something wonderful and good and essentially instructive about every human and every situation. And so that's my secret to joy. And it kind of is more useful, I think, in my life than merely the definition, because the definition is there, but we don't necessarily utilize the definition.
Right. The definition isn't really that useful. So I like that. I like what you said. And what comes to mind is I had a friend once that said, I know you don't know, but if you did know, what would it be? So it kind of bypasses the front mind. Like if you're like, I have nothing to be grateful for in this moment. Well, I know you don't know, but if you did know, what would you say? And then the person's like, oh, well, if I did know, I would say this. It's so funny how you can really always find something, right?
That's it. How can we invite ourselves to dig a little deeper whenever we're feeling something other than joy? And once in a while, as we were talking about, it is important to feel the entire spectrum of emotions when they come up in the moment, fully receiving them with open arms, heart, and our whole being, so we can feel that emotion. And then we can take that emotion in. We don't necessarily have to react to it. We can respond to it. But that, I think, adds to the full spectrum of the joy of our being, is to be really in touch with things that come up with our life.
Yeah. And you were just talking to me about that. We were talking a little bit before I hit record, and you were talking about how, when you have a feeling other than joy or other than happiness, because your name is Happy, that you really can you talk a little bit about how you dive into that?
Yes. For a very long time, I observed that it was much healthier for me to face the emotion fully, to stop everything. As if we fall down and hurt ourselves, I'm a kind of person that will stop and rub my knee if I hurt it, even just slightly, and acknowledge my knee and say, I'm so sorry, I'm with you, I love you, and rub my knee. So if I do that for my knee, shouldn't I do that for my heart? So yes, when my heart is feeling anything, and it could be a full spectrum, it could be a moment of jealousy that people don't like to talk about. I feel that too, very rarely, because of the lifestyle that we set up for ourselves. But if I feel that, then I instantly convert it into, oh, I'm happy for that person. And I really stop until I fully feel that joy and that oneness. So I could be with anger or with sadness. My sister recently died 2 weeks ago. And so I've been really, she was such a wonderful person that I've been diving deep into the center of the earth of sadness. And there's a great gratitude at the bottom of that, but we have to dig deeply enough and let ourselves cry and emote in a healthy way. And there's a certain point that we all decide for ourselves of where it's enough, because there's a certain point that if we stay in an emotion instead of expressing it, it can be stuck. And then it could lead to depression or into an angry and unhealthy persona. But to feel a burst of anger and to really experience that is energizing. And it doesn't have to harm anyone or harm ourselves. We can acknowledge that we feel that and go deeper into why. What I love to do is explore more deeply and more deeply each time and get behind the anger. And it's so interesting to find out what's behind the sorrow is usually something really silly or something very, very, very revealing about ourselves, that, oh, maybe I was attached to that, or I thought this and it wasn't accurate about reality. And so now we know. And when we know, then those emotions just, they relieve themselves from our being.
Yeah, in a healthy way, like you said, instead of it being unproductive. Or even, I know because my son died, this 8 years ago, and I had my own grieving process, which I didn't really know what I was doing. But what I did do is I did a lot of fasting so that my body was, I felt like I wasn't getting confused. And then I would just, when the feeling would come up, I would howl, like these howls would come out of me of pain. But then on the other side of it was this feeling of bliss, like this feeling of relief. And you just move on. So it's pockets. Have you experienced it in that way?
I have. And that howling is so deep and so primordial, primeval, and very effective. And I think it's such a pleasure to meet other people who have really looked into their emotions, and so that we can talk about this and we can be there for each other as well. Ultimately, we're there for ourselves. It's a solo experience. However, talking about it is so helpful too.
Yeah. And talking about it without it being like, oh, I'm so sorry, you poor thing, or like the pity. It's more like, hey, let's talk about the experience. What are you experiencing? And so it gives people permission to just have an experience, whether it's, oh, you know what, right now I'm actually feeling joyful thinking about my memories, or now I'm feeling, and not making it wrong. Like, oh, it's okay. Like, well, maybe it's not okay in this moment and it will pass.
Exactly. And I think it's really amazing if we can stay in a sense of wonder throughout our lives, the way that children, infants do. How can we, in all circumstances, including the dying of loved ones, including whatever is going on with us, remain in the sense of awe and for life, reverence for life, and a wonder of, isn't this an amazing, unique situation? That in itself is something to celebrate.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. And is that kind of like, is it any of that behind your book when you wrote Bliss Consciousness? Because I know you've traveled the world and you've experienced some of the stories I've heard you tell, like so many amazing things with these tribal people. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about like what was behind your book, Bliss Consciousness, and anything you'd like to share about that.
Thank you for asking. Bliss Conscious Communication. Very, very few people know this because almost nobody has asked, what was your original inspiration? My mother and father, who are still with us, are alive and well. They are one of the best examples of people who can it's amazing how they can ceaselessly argue with each other. And it always, and so I grew up, in a household where both mom and dad didn't communicate in a normal way. And they would basically argue about everything and put each other down. And they still do it. They're incredible. I mean, I love them. And that's just their modus operandi when it comes to communication. And so when I was a little child, it was shocking to my being. And I was often in my room. They would want me to go to my room a lot. And so I had a very challenging childhood. And I realized other adults don't necessarily argue. That's weird, because I thought this was normal, but it was very shocking to my being. And so as I grew older, I thought there must be a better way of communication than this in a family, in a nuclear family. And so I sought out people before civilization. I thought the civilization is a little complex and there's a lot of problems that are happening here. Is it as a result of the society that we're living in, the society that our ancestors and parents and we have co-created? I wasn't sure, and I set to find out, and that's what inspired me to be an anthropologist, were family conflicts that didn't seem to be able to be resolved in the context of living in a suburb and a father with a professional job and a mom that, they just weren't very joyful people. And so it was a lifelong, at least the first 20 years of my life, until I realized the tribal people, when people are closer to nature, they tend to be, it's not a rule, but it's a tendency, when they're spiritually close to nature, they tend to be happier people. And if you receive the company, the blessing of two people in your company that are both happy, both living a natural lifestyle, both content internally, the chances are very high that their communication is going to be peaceful, loving, and harmonic. And so I realized it's more than just talking. The Bliss Conscious Communication, it's a play shop and a playbook of looking at how we speak. However, it also is much deeper than that, looking at our lifestyle and are we living our dreams? Are we being peace? Are we being love in our everyday lives?
Yeah. And I really have witnessed that from you since I've known you, Happy. And I think you're one of the only people I know. And that was why the reason I was excited to get you on as one of my first podcast guests is you're one of the only people I know that just constantly holds this vibration of joy and happiness. And like, I know you've had times of frustration and you've told me some stories, but they always tend to turn out well, because I think you go in with this attitude of like, all right, let's see what we're looking at here. And like you said, discovery and curiosity versus like, why is this happening to me? Or what's wrong with that person?
Thank you. I feel that you're the same way, that we have the spirit of pleasant adventure. We have the spirit of wonder. I'll never forget when you said, I'm moving to Bend. And I said, what? And you said, yeah, I went up there. It's beautiful. And I'm moving to Bend. You have this spirit of adventure that is fantastic. And that has something to do with your inner bliss communication, that you're in touch with your dreams and you have a compass that aims higher and in touch with your ideals, going for right livelihood at every opportunity. I really appreciate that about you.
Oh, thank you. And I guess we're nice little mirrors for each other then. Yeah. And I mean, you just visited Bend recently and we had so much fun and I met your partner Free. And as you
My
were
beloved.
talking, your beloved, and I love like what you were saying about this sense of adventure, like the two of you, if you were to follow Happy on Facebook, you would see you guys are always on some kind, I mean, your whole life is an adventure and you've just created that for yourself. Basically, yes.
Absolutely. That is actually my paradigm. When people say life is ... I fill in the blanks, a ceaseless, pleasant adventure.
A ceaseless, pleasant adventure. Perfect.
That's the amazing thing. I feel that we are just getting started. We're right now today building a dome and a deck. We're going to be hosting. This is pretty wild. I never thought I would ever say this, but I think, and this is a secret, just you and I, and maybe somebody who's listening and maybe not, I'm thinking about hosting a raw spirit retreat at our home next year.
Oh my gosh.
Just
Count me in.
Just about 20 people. Oh, wonderful. I would love for you to be there. That would be amazing.
20 people. Yeah, right. So Happy, for those of you guys listening, produced a festival called the Raw Spirit Festival that was one of the best festivals I've ever attended. And I would go as a vendor to sell raw food creations that I was making. And the people I met at those festivals, and you would always hold them in these beautiful places. The first one I went to was in Sedona, and we were on, believe it or not, a golf course, which sounds weird, but after all the booths were up and all the magical little flower creations, it didn't even look like a golf course anymore. We were just on this rolling green oasis, basically. And like, how did you come up with doing these retreats?
I had this dream about helping the world become healthy. And after 7 years on a 101% raw vegan organic diet, I was in a Buddhist monastery at midnight around 2002 or 2003. And there I was meditating into the midnight because I heard if you drink at New Year's Eve, you're drinking for 2 years, said a Buddhist monk. However, if you're meditating New Year's Eve at midnight, you're meditating for 2 years. So I like to bring in my New Year's with meditation every year at midnight. And in the middle of my meditation came this voice or this realization: you are to put on a raw vegan festival because you cannot simply be satisfied with helping yourself to become healthy and helping the Buddhist monks at this monastery who were waking up on raw vegan foods that I had introduced to about 200 Buddhist monks and nuns. And suddenly their diseases are gone and they're more energized than ever. And it's creating almost a revolution in this monastery because they had so much energy. And so after realizing that day, I saw so many people after 3 weeks on raw vegan food telling me everything is changing in our monastery because of you and this new diet, that it needs to go to the world, the larger world. And so it was just a question of time a couple of years later when I found the right first venue in Sedona. And then we put on 200 events after that. Some of them were only events for 60 or 70 people in people's homes, but some of them were 200 or 100 people, and some of them were thousands of people. And the size never really mattered. It was really about the quality of the inspirational learning between each other. I thought that the speakers were awesome. The musicians were awesome. The chefs like yourself were incredible. And it was really about people meeting each other, forming community and friends, and being there, supporting each other.
And you know what I love about those festivals? And I mean, I just went to the Beloved Festival here in Oregon, Tidewater, Oregon, that happens every August. And that was on a little larger scale. But what I loved about those Raw Spirit festivals is that we all had this thing in common, whether it was being raw food or vegan or whatever, but it was beyond that. It was more like we all just had this desire to connect to each other's hearts and, be in a place of nature where we felt like our natural birthright of being in nature and being in community, like a utopian society for a weekend.
It's so true. And of everything on earth, the one aspect of my life that that feeds me is living close to nature. So we don't really live in a house, even though we just built 2 homes. We live in between them. We live outside. Our kitchen is outdoor. Our living room is our lawn. Our bathtub is our pool, and the ponds and the creeks right near our home. And that feeling of living in nature is what I wish to convey, so that anybody can have a raw food festival in a hall inside of a hotel. However, this one was mostly outdoors, and the hotel was only there as a backdrop just in case it rained or something. But it was really about communing with each other in nature as much as possible, so that we can feel that, because a lot of people flew in from New York City or LA and they don't have that opportunity.
You're so right about that, because every time I go to one of these events, it could be like a longevity event or something having to do with biohacking or health, and they're always in these air-conditioned hotels. And I think, gosh, well, why can't they do it the way Happy did hers when we were out at that one point we were out in Prescott and in this bowl with boulders all around us and everybody camping on the earth. And it's like, yeah, I would love to see more of us get more and more back to that. And I know you're leading the way. What's that?
Were you there when Fantuzzi got really hot? I think at Prescott, the first or the second one, and Fantuzzi took off his clothes. He jumped off of a cliff into the lake, and hundreds of people followed him. So it became this wildest. Oh, and then was it Chris Whitco? Lots of people started putting mud all over their naked bodies, and so there were literally hundreds of people looking black as night, this really black mud. It was fantastic. And then the mayor found out about it. The mayor of Prescott found out about it. And he met with me at this board meeting after the festival with the head of chief of police and the sheriff department and all the departments that have to participate in the festival if they want to or not. And so he tossed me a Ziploc bag full of dried beef jerky. And everybody at the table was aghast, like, she's never going to eat that. And I said, "Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I really appreciate that." And he didn't know, but I fed it to our neighbor's dog, which was fantastic. He loved it. But meanwhile, then the mayor said, "The next time somebody goes naked at one of your festivals," and everybody's like, oh, like horrified. And then he said, "I'm going to decide who goes naked." And suddenly I started giggling, and I realized the guy was like a closet hippie living in Prescott, Arizona. So that anything can go at these outdoor festivals. There's just much more room for creativity and self-expression, and people are barefoot, almost but I wasn't inspiring people to go naked at the festival. I was kind of surprised myself. I couldn't stop it. I kind of tried to stop it because there were kids there and everything, but fortunately they were so full of mud all over their bodies that I don't think anybody I think it was a hoot. People just loved it because it was really hot out and it was a relief.
And it's something out of the ordinary. Like, come on, let's face it. A lot of people are living really ordinary day-to-day lives, and to be able to get the opportunity to take your clothes off and coat yourself in mud and have everybody be like in it with you, and there's no shame and embarrassment, or it's just fun. It's just like, oh, let's be kids again. That's awesome.
People were screaming like 6-year-olds. They were having so much fun. How can you stop that, right?
You don't even want to stop it. And that's why we go to these kind of festivals. And that's why, like you're saying, people from New York City came because they're just trying to look for a way out. And I love that you're teaching this nature aspect. When you came to visit me here in Bend, I invited you and Free to stay at my house. And you're like, well, we're going to go camp. And I said to you, well, do you need to take a shower? Because I knew you'd been on the road. You're like, well, we just go swimming in the lakes. And I'm like, I love that. Just, once, and I get it. Because if I camp for a few days, I don't want to be back inside my house. Even last night, it was like 9:00 and I thought, I'm not going up into my room. I want to go. I just wandered around out in my neighborhood looking at this blood moon because of all the smoke in the air. And I was like, yeah, I just want to find a place to just like curl up and sleep out here.
Exactly. Well, I have a quiet rule, which I don't express very often. I just politely decline usually when people invite me to stay. But that rule is that if I can't have a flower shower or a tinkle outside somewhere in their garden, then it's probably too many people. It's too close to civilization. At our home, we can just walk down the path into the canyon and go tinkle. And I just love being so close to nature. When you squat, we women are so lucky. Whenever I squat, there I am in front of a new plant. And so I get down to a 1 or 2 year old's level and see the world, look at the insects, be close to the ground. And that's very important to me. It sounds like a small thing, but it makes me happy.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, you're right. I notice that when I go camping, I'm like, oh, what's this plant? Oh, this is cool. And you just start like inspecting whatever's in front of you. And also on that note, which is really interesting, when I was, in my birthing classes when I was pregnant, it was like all about home birth, and they were really teaching us that American women or northern women, Western women, whatever you want to call us, don't squat enough, and that's why birth is harder. And so they were really encouraging us to squat, and because that's how we were designed to really sit and expel things from our body. It wasn't, the toilet is a modern invention that has actually deterred women from having really healthy natural births. So I love the whole idea of squatting. And I actually now have what's called a squatty potty in my house, which kind of raises your legs up high enough to make it so you are in a squatting position. And it's so much better on your whole digestive system and everything.
Exactly. And some people just go to the hardware store and buy a couple of 4x4 blocks or 4x8 blocks that just raise you up a few inches. So whichever way, what I noticed is that with the childbirth, that have you ever seen or heard of a wild animal that lies down on its back and gives childbirth? That is the most ridiculously unnatural position. And so no animal, no mammal ever has given birth on their back. They all do that standing up. If it's on 2 legs or 4 legs, they're on their knees. And so
I'm thinking about horses. They just stand up, or cows. Yeah.
That's right. And so it's completely, and monkeys are bending over. So it's very unnatural. And I think it's a lot more laborious to be on the back than to be in a natural position.
Exactly. And I think that was invented by, I want to say King Henry VIII or one of those kings, because he wanted to watch his wife give birth. And that was the only reason they started having women be on their back, so the men could watch, which is
wild.
Like crazy. Yeah, that's wild, huh? We need to change that.
Definitely.
Which a lot of people are doing. I mean, even here in Bend, there's so many home birth women and women talking about taking back their birth and taking back their power through birth, because birthing is a powerful, powerful thing to do. I mean, obviously the whole world is birthed by women. So to be able to be in your own power as you do that is just beyond measure.
Indeed.
Wow, we are just all over the map. I love all these things we're talking about.
I do too.
Oh, so, the one thing I notice about us, and I want to say raw foodies, even though I'm not like 100% raw anymore, I still consider myself a raw foodie. And we tend to get into these topics and subjects a lot about how our bodies function, because we've really been so far removed from it. And that's why I love the raw foodists and the raw food movement, because we go back to this primal place. Like, well, what did original humans eat? And how are they accessing this food? And, we talk about picking fruit off the tree and eating it fresh and enzyme rich and all that. And it's because we have this innate remembrance that that's really what we're supposed to be doing. I mean, humans, I think, are the only ones who have to be told what to eat and who are debating what the right diet is. Every other animal just instinctually knows what to eat.
This is true. And I think it's a very important practice for those who would like to do that, to eat at least one neighbor, one resident per day, because I believe that if we forage at least one leaf, if it's a pine needle or an acorn, which are very edible here right now in Arizona, we have alkaline soil, or I was just eating arugula under our trampoline, which has gone feral, that if we eat locally, our intelligence about what to eat locally will increase just by sheer habit. And not only that, if we are eating a tomato from South America and an avocado from California, and we're not living there, let's say, and a pepper from Minnesota, then how can we possibly be present? How can we be physically present when everything we're eating is coming in from afar? So I think it's very essential for our well-being mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and physically, of course, to not only eat in season fruits if we feel like doing that, but also to be in touch with what's around us today, right here, right now, right under our feet, or right behind the fence in our yard, let's say.
I totally agree. And I know you actually teach foraging classes for that reason. And do you teach those in Arizona right now?
Funny you should ask. I'm actually just creating a flyer to let people know that I'll be teaching a class called Let's Get Wild Edible Foraging on September 9th. That's a Sunday, and it will be from 10 to 12 o'clock. That will be our morning church of foraging. And what we do, we walk, we hike, we try to take another trail from our house every time, and we'll go up into various bioclimes, but they will be, the entire hike is only a third of a mile because it's not really about hiking. And we bring our own, we bring a bowl, we bring scissors, and we also, before we do that, we get down on our hands and knees and share our thanks through song and dance and really honor the earth and everybody that we're about to eat, that's about to become one with us at some point, which is a mystical question. Like, when do we actually become with what, with who enters our being? It's so we try to bring the mystery back into foraging and the respect of that. So then after that, we come and we feast, and around the pool or in the pool, past the bowl, across the pool. Sometimes we have a floating potluck.
It's interesting because I know you live in Arizona, which I lived in Arizona for 7 years. And a lot of people that have never lived there are just curious, like, how could you live in Arizona? What's there? They just think of it as dry, hot cacti. And you know as well as I do that once you get out there in nature, oh my goodness, the abundance and just the tiny little things hiding under other things. And when it rains and all the wildflowers and the monsoons, and oh my gosh, Arizona is one of the richest lands I've ever lived on, actually.
It's a secret, isn't it? Because people think it's a bunch of sand and cacti. And actually, we live in a little known rainforest. Right now, we are harboring refugees from Northern California and Southern Oregon because of smoke, apparently, that's in the West. And it's gone all the way up into British Columbia. And we haven't had any smoke all summer because it starts raining here on the 4th of July, almost like clockwork. And it has not stopped raining for 2 months. We get rain almost every day, sometimes twice a day. And it is so lusciously green. So we actually experience 2 springs, one in March, April, May, and then another one, July, August, September. So that's why I'm teaching a foraging class, because it's so abundant. And there's so many wild fruits and nuts right now that the wild Arizona walnuts are in. So I'm making black walnut tincture.
Okay.
Etc. Yes, there's so much happening. And if anybody ever wishes to get out of the smoke of the West Coast, now it's called the smoke season, unfortunately.
It is. I'm in it right now.
And yes, in Arizona, we still have summer, fortunately. And so there's a big migration. There's literally probably tens of thousands of people from California living in Arizona right now.
Yeah. And I know Arizona has really, like the market in Tucson has really picked up because a lot of people are fleeing California, not just because of the smoke, but for multiple reasons, just feeling a calling to something more wild or natural. Or I grew up in California, and then when I moved to Arizona, I'm like, I didn't know you could kind of live indoor, outdoor like this, where you feel like you're connected with nature so much.
Mm-hmm. And I think people originally moved to California, maybe your grandparents' generation, to live the outdoor lifestyle. But then it's a question of people. You can have paradise. I don't know if you remember that conversation, but many people said, well, Happy, where are we going to move? We would like this festival to happen all the time. And at one point, I actually tried to buy that resort in Sedona. Not that I really wanted to buy it, but I thought, well, wouldn't that be amazing to be able to have a raw vegan spirit festival all the time? But people did ask that question seriously, like, should we move to Costa Rica or or Ecuador, remember, was hot, or
Oh,
different
yeah.
places, Hawaii. And then I said, here's the problem. If we all move to one place, we will destroy it. So the truth is, the preciousness of these rare festivals is precious in a sense because it's rare. And so let us go out and be a festival unto ourselves, unto each other, and bring the best with us, and then teach other people even better than that, whatever it is, whatever your bliss is, and create your community right where you are is the best community. And if it's not the best community, if you say, no, that's not true, then go find whatever is the best community for you. And that's
Yes.
exactly what you did. And the beauty is that we're everywhere. We have infiltrated with positivity and loving kindness, and we're secretly lurking around the entire planet.
Well, and that,
right.
yeah. And I love what you said about that, because I feel like the reason festivals work is because we don't do them every day. Just like anything, when people live in large communes, at first it's paradise, and then, the reality sets in. So like you said, be a bliss tribe unto yourself and bring your light to those around you. And every city needs people doing their bliss consciousness work, their, bliss conscious communication like you do. And if we're all doing it in different places in the world, and like what my mission here is in Bend is to build community. And the way I build community is through food, through conscious food and other things that I'm conjuring up at the moment. And people will come to that because they're seeking that also. But we all need to be all over the planet, Costa Rica, Ecuador, here, Arizona, doing it so that we can just kind of be little ripples, those little ripples in the water that just keep rippling out as everybody starts to wake up.
It's so true.
So speaking on that note, I have another question I was going to ask you about, which is, I've always thought of you as an extraordinary person since I've met you. Just something about you, even the way you say good tidings instead of hello. And what do you think that is? I know you talked a little bit about how your parents, they didn't communicate super consciously, so that inspired you. But what do you think has taken you from this place of what I would call an everyday person to someone extraordinary?
First of all, that's so kind of you. I consider myself an extraordinarily ordinary person. However, if one person in the world thinks otherwise, and that may be you, then, well, I'll just go with that. Thank you. Let's see. It seems that I made a decision when I was 12. It was a very serious decision because due to a lot of childhood suffering, I was locked in my room a lot. I was kind of abandoned a lot as a child. And basically my mom I was a handful. Apparently I was ill all the time. And so she called me the booger baby. I was just very ill and in the hospital a lot and very unpleasant to be around, I guess, because I was coughing and very unhealthy, and I was on antibiotics. And so as that way of that, they just put me in my room a lot. And so I had a lot of solitude, and that solitude, that pain of feeling like you're going to die at a very young age from not being able to move my head and having a congestion and being in the hospital a lot, it made me more of a serious child. And so by the time I was 12, I was already a philosopher. People would note that about me. I was thinking about what's more important. And so I would look at values. What is more important? Is friendship more important than truth? That was a very pivotal moment for me. Is friendship more important than truth? And I decided that truth is more important than friendship, that I would rather go a path that is true to me, that is honest, that is living my values, than be part of a clique that I think it's not living that highest possible way. And so that pivotal moment of saying, I am alone in this world. I have been since I was born, very alone, unusually alone childhood, though did have friends when I could go out. And that moment of truth, that defining moment, I know Gandhi had it. I know a lot of different truth seekers make that choice. I could never turn back from that. And so for me, it's never been about being popular. It's never been about really being liked, or I'd love to be loved, but it's never been about, I want to do whatever I can for you to love me. Instead, it's more about loving unconditionally. Of course, there's always conditions, but it's more about being true to my path and not deviating unless it's for the sake of adventure and discovery. But I was really into right livelihood since I was a child. And so I noticed that 90% of the jobs out there I couldn't do. And I thought, this is so limiting. So I finally found jobs that I could do that were true to that. And having a lot of inner discipline, not expecting anyone else around me to do that because it's not their path, right? That's my path. But having the discipline of exercising as much as I could and exercising my mind, my spirit, the physical body, being generous as much as possible without also, I must also be generous to myself, but having a balance there, knowing that that I'm not a parent. I've never been pregnant, which is unusual. So I decided not to have children, and that there's so many people to love in the world that need love, and also animals and plants and even soil, that there's no deficiency of areas where I could give love. And so that's been kind of my modus operandi, is to Kaizen, which means the art of continual improvement, wishing to not compare again with anybody else, but inside my own being, how can I live a more helpful life? What is life about? I ask myself, how can I be more eco today? How can I be more loving? What's really essential today? How can I really enjoy life today? And I ask these questions, and the answers come in that moment. And so I think it's really important for us to all ask ourselves, what are the most important questions that I can ask myself? I mean, is it the most common question used to be when people wore watches? What time is it? Was the most common question Americans asked each other. And how are you? But so how can we be extraordinary for each other? And I wish, extraordinary, ordinary. I don't know if I'm extraordinary or if I'm ordinary. It's not something I would contemplate myself that much. However, if we were all living our own extraordinary best in an ordinary everyday life, then I think we'd be much happier and more peaceful, more creative, and just loving life. Loving life. For me, religion is not, even though I studied a lot of world religions and went really deep into Buddhism, and then for a while into Hinduism and Zen and Hinayana or Theravada and paganism. And for me, life is my religion. Life and love. Like, it's just that simple. It's right in the face in this present moment. How can we really love life?
So it sounds like you're just talking about being in the present moment, every moment, and being aware.
Being aware and I feel like I'm just a beginner in a sense. I would like to be less busy and more slowly and succulently move through the planet in a way that's so slow that every being I meet, I have created enough time or presence that I can really deeply love them, like commune with them, even if it's just a moment in a grocery store, for us to be present with that cashier who's working so hard, or to compliment the bag person who is lovingly putting our food in our own bag that we bring into the store, hopefully. So how can we do that? How can we be that? And some people have mastered that. And there's certain people that are very famous for doing that. But for me, I'm just a perpetual beginner. And I know you do that a lot. It's like the biggest goal is to be present.
It is. I think that's the goal. And I realize as you're saying it, I thought to myself, let's conjure that up together, because that's where I find my joy and bliss, is in the present moment. And I realize these festivals feed me so much, because when I'm there, I have no agenda. I don't care about which group I see or which workshop I attend. If I get to it, great. But if I see a person that I know from Bend that was there, I'm like, you know what? For once, I have 4 days of nothing planned. Like, let's just talk. Like, how are you? What's going on with you? Like, let's be just together in the nothingness. And I am loving to conjure more of that in my day-to-day life as well. And as you were saying it, I thought, we can do that. Like, how can we? I'm not sure, but we can, and it's happening more for me now that I'm focusing on it. having people just drop by, like when you and Free did. And I thought, I'm just going to drop everything else I was doing and let's just hang out for 3 hours and walk along the river and sit on my couch. Why not? This is what you're going to really remember.
That's it. And that was so generous of you and all your staff and your students in your home, inviting us in, enjoying conversations. And then we started getting into our wild stories. And I could just feel the giggle factor was rising with all of us.
Yeah. And and that is really something I do love about you that you may know about yourself, but from my perspective, you delight in life. Like everything is, even the story that you told me about, the guy that was building around your area that you got everything to stop, they were destroying the land, but you giggled through it like, oh yeah, this happened and that happened. And then, it's just, I think it's just that like lightness that you bring that it's why everything always works out for you. I feel like because of that light.
Well, here's the funny thing. Everything always works out for everyone. And I know it's quite a paradigm. It's quite a strange paradigm, but everything always works out for everyone. And it's just the perception, the way that we see it and the way they see it. It's the way the story is told.
I agree. It's all about how you look at it. Exactly. And it just becomes when something's happening, like for me, when people talk about, oh my gosh, I can't believe you lost a child and that must have been terrible. And I say, it was really horrible and it was hard. However, now it's become part of my life story. And so it's kind of all in how you frame things. And you can be like, oh, I'm the one with the tragedy, or you can be, wow, this is part of who I am in this lifetime and part of who I'm becoming and part of my process. And it's all about framing. It's all about framing.
And there's a certain, you could call it weird. Weird means wonderful, actually, but there's certain uncanny and mysterious beauty and perfection in that part of your life. It's there on a deeper level. And of course, people at first have a hard time seeing that. However, I know you carry that with you and that you deeply know that there's this mystical perfection in it. And that's what I mean, is that everything works out all right in the end, even though there's huge tragedy on the planet.
Yeah. And our souls just can't really be destroyed. So, like if we can look at it, and I know you said you're a meditator, and I talk about this probably on every podcast, but for me, the fact that meditation helps me become more of an observer, because the whole process of meditating is observing yourself meditating. Look at me. I'm sitting there having a thought. And so it really in life helps me be the observer of every emotion. Oh, she's angry at this moment. What's going on with, like, kind of being more curious versus getting sucked into it.
Yes. Very well said.
Yeah. So we are going to break for the tip of the week and we will be right back. Have you ever thought about cleansing or fasting? Maybe you have and you just don't know where to start. Because I've been a detox expert for years and I've helped so many people cleanse and fast and even do liver flushes, I have a lot of advice and information on that. One would be, if you're new to cleansing, is just to start by doing a 12-hour fast. Now that's pretty doable. It's for people that are kind of scared or they're just not sure where to start. You would just start maybe at 8 p.m. on a Saturday night, and then you can eat again at 8 a.m. on a Sunday morning. That's just 12 hours. It means no night eating, which is great because that's a great habit to get into. You can start practicing this on a daily basis and just try that out for a week and see if you notice a difference. Once you've gotten pretty good at this 12-hour fast, you can start doing what's called intermittent fasting, which is an 18-hour a day fast. Now, a lot of people practice it daily where they don't eat until maybe, let's say, noon every day. They just either have coffee or tea in the morning or something without calories. And then at noon, they have their first meal. What it does when you start doing this practice of intermittent fasting is it lowers your IGF-1 hormone. This hormone is tied to disease and aging and even to cancer. So by lowering that hormone, you're really doing your body huge benefits. Now, if you're not someone who feels like you can intermittent fast every day, you could just pick one day a week, like let's say a Sunday, and do a 24-hour fast. And that would be either just water or really any liquids or juices that are under 500 calories. And that could include green juices, which I really love to do because it gives you tons of energy without making you feel like your energy is dragging or that you don't get too hungry. So that could be something you could do every Sunday, and then just start that practice up and do that for a month. So for 4 weeks in a row. Once you get really good at the 24-hour fast, you can extend it to 36 hours, where instead of eating dinner on Sunday, you go all the way till Monday morning until you eat your next meal. So you get the full 36-hour benefit. And people report, as well as myself, that your energy soars, your mental cognition increases, inflammation goes down, it decreases wrinkles, any signs of aging start to reverse. Not all signs of aging, of course, but it helps reverse aging. It just helps overall, it's a feel-good practice, and there's no harm in it. It will not lower your metabolism. In fact, most people report an increase in metabolism and ongoing weight loss. Once you get really adept at doing once a week of a 36-hour fast or a 24-hour fast, you can add a second day on, maybe like a Wednesday of a 24-hour fast. So that would just be Tuesday night dinner till Wednesday night dinner. It's pretty easy to do once you get used to it. So when you start this practice, you'll just find your own rhythm. I hope that you really enjoy intermittent fasting as much as I do. I know you've talked a little bit about eating wild food and foraging. Do you have like a favorite food or supplement or something that you could share with us that has really brought your life to a really great level?
Yes, I love celery juice. If I'd like to achieve a natural high, I will simply juice about 3 long heads of celery and drink it. Other times I will drink parsley juice. I have this feeling that most of us raw vegan friendlies eat too much sugar-based foods, too many fruits, especially dried fruits. I would shy away from dried fruits as much as possible, even if they're rehydrated, because they're difficult to digest and they're expensive. They're needlessly expensive, and they're usually out of season. They're not fresh. They're probably not made by you today. So if there's fresh fruit around, that's just a better choice. It's a less concentrated sugar. So I really inspire people, hopefully, to drink more juices. There's nothing can go wrong with a juice fast, as far as I'm concerned, especially if it's a short juice fast for a few days. If we don't drink juice every day in our life, we're probably somewhat compromising our optimal energy level. And so I like to drink 2 or 3 glasses of juice about every second day. So maybe one day I'll make a big smoothie, another day I'll make a big juice, and they can last throughout the day if I would like to sip on them later. And then a third day I might make a juice and a smoothie. Of course, every day I make a salad of some kind. And then whatever is local, whatever is fresh, whatever can be even wild, edibly foraged, to juice it, to make a salad that marinates sometimes for an hour before we eat it to soften it a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And your basic standard raw vegan fare is what I'm still primarily eating. It does. And however, I don't limit myself, but I do tell people who come to me sometimes and say, I've tried raw vegan and it just doesn't work. And I ask them, what are you eating? Well, I eat fruit all day long. Doug Graham told me eat, 20 bananas and I'm doing it all right. And I said, whoa, 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 whoa. Are you eating your greens? Because that's often where we go wrong. Are you eating enough vegetables? And usually, well, I'm eating them, but I don't like greens. So no, I don't eat greens. Well, then I have to let you know that you better eat meat. Here's the weird advice that I tell people, and it works. If a person is not into eating greens, then they need to get it secondhand.
Mm-hmm.
And a cow and other grass-eating, vegetable-eating animals it's secondhand greens. But people can't just eat fruit because it's not sustainable, and they will lose their teeth. Eventually, their hair will get frizzy, and their nails and their vitality will eventually. Their nervous system will fail. And so sometimes it takes a few years, maybe even a decade before that happens. There's a lot of raw vegans that have false teeth, and a lot of them have great big smiles and you don't know they have false teeth. But I always say to them, when did you get your false teeth? And are those real? And what do you think caused your false teeth? A lot of famous authors of raw vegan. Not me, but a lot, because I eat more vegetables. My teeth aren't perfect, but I have every one of my teeth. I have a few cavities, but they were way before, when I was in my teens, I got cavities for drinking Pepsi day and night.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. So I think it's really vital that we eat hard vegetables such as a cucumber, a celery, kale stems, not just the leaves. People throw out the stems, are the most succulent part, because that you can feel in the hardness of those vegetables. It translates into protein. It translates into minerals that we require for our bones and our muscles and everything else. So our hair, our nails, our teeth, even eating carrots, just the whole carrot, you can peel it if you need to.
Yeah.
Crunching into it, strengthening our teeth, like crunching into celery, just having a snack of a cucumber or a pepper or something. Very vital. It's very near and dear to my heart because I see certain people say, no, raw food doesn't work. Well, if we're not eating a healthy, nutritionally balanced raw food, it definitely doesn't work. If we're only eating chocolate for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, then it's not sustainable. And we're better off
only eating blended things. Like you need to chew.
Blended.
Well. Yeah.
Victoria Butanka discovered that. Victoria Butanka, sometimes people give her a hard time. She's a phenomenal raw food pioneer, researcher. And she discovered through the School of Hard Knocks that blending smoothies every day, that's why I don't have smoothies every day, that they soften their gums. They're not good for our teeth. They're overall better. Like if somebody's on a junk food diet, sure, go on smoothies for a few months. If that's their path to it, that's fantastic. But it's just not something we want to have every day for the rest of our lives.
Right. I feel like you need to chew, but also taking a break, like a 3-day blended or juice cleanse, like you were saying. I love this. I love everything you said. I'm totally in alignment with. And because I have been in this movement as long as you have and seen the people that haven't succeeded in it, it's usually because they're not getting the mineral balance. And our greens, greens are, even in the winter, kale is growing. Like greens are prolific for a reason. They're on every tree. Not that we can eat the leaves off every tree, but there's green stuff everywhere. So we should pay attention to that. There's way more greens on the planet than there are fruits.
It's the greatest culinary gift of the planet. That's for sure. So it's pretty obvious. And all the other animals seem to get it very naturally. And so we can too.
I know. I love that. So maybe today we'll inspire someone to go have a big arugula salad, which is my favorite salad right now. I love it.
That's a great idea. I think I'll do that after this podcast.
I know, me too. Let's have lunch after this. I'm going to ask you a few questions. And one of them is, if you could ask the all-knowing, all that is, God being, one question about life and get a definitive answer, what do you think you'd ask?
How can we successfully create a planet that is free of war and disease and I don't even like saying the word, the H word, I call it, but hatred and other activities that would surround hatred. How could we free our planet of those three and just make it happen?
Do you have one or two things that you could ask our audience to start doing today to access or experience more joy or happiness in their life? I know you've given us so many already.
Yes. One is to dance it out. If somebody is, let's say, in a funky mood or slightly irritated or even entering into a disagreement, can we answer that with dancing? Can we answer that with leaping up and down? Can we do something unusual to respond to that? And if the person is saying, I don't like this, this, and this, and this, can we say, there's only one thing I like to say. I really, really love you.
Oh.
And so they're not expecting that. And I love doing that because it throws the whole argument off and it's gone. It just completely collapses that. So how else can we be healthy? We can really love ourselves. Any negative thought about ourselves, those I can'ts, we can change those to infinite possibilities. I am an infinite being and I am deserving of love. I deserve to be loved. I am love and I'm a wonderful being. I am a blessing to this planet. And if we keep saying that and thinking it and feeling it genuinely, we are that. And then, of course, it's contagious. as you know, because you are an exemplary, one more time of all of what I just said.
Oh, awesome. You know what I love about that is it's almost like you're future pacing us, because sometimes this happened to me last week. I got caught off guard at the cafe and someone was upset with me about something that I didn't really do. But anyway, in that moment, I felt a little defensive. And if I could future pace, and that, as I look back on it, I'm like, oh, if I could do that again, I would have just put my hands out to her and said, how can I help you? Or how can I make this right for you? And if we can just in our minds right now, like just plant that in there so that the next time something comes up, like, how can I love you right now? Is basically when you say to that person what you just said, I love you. It's basically you're asking them or telling them like, you're worthy of love in this moment. I know you're upset, but like, how can I love you? And wow, I love that. That's powerful.
and asking that question instead of saying I love you, asking that question could be more powerful, even to just say, excuse me, how could I love you? How could I really love you in this moment?
Mm-hmm. I think about the times when I would have loved to be asked that, when you're upset and then someone's like, what's your problem? It's like, oh, wow, I just need love right now. Can't you see that?
Mm-hmm. A friend of ours, Fantuzzi, used to say, he still sings it out. It's all love or a calling for love.
Yeah.
And so it really is all love or a calling for love. That's what people are doing when they're acting out in a different way.
Yeah. I feel like we could just talk and talk and talk. It's been awesome. And so I know you have your book, Bliss Conscious Communication, which I recommend people read. It's so fun. Do you have any other books that you would recommend to people, or any other things that you would share with someone to maybe find out more about?
Well, I am no secret to contact. So if you'd like to reach out and say hi, I'm on Facebook, Happy Oasis, just as it's spelled, just as it sounds.
Awesome. And I'll put a link on the show notes for everybody.
Fantastic. And the Bliss Conscious Communication book, feel free to buy it directly from me because it seems to be going on Amazon, and I think somebody else is printing it because there's a lot of them for sale, and I'm keeping track. So it looks like there's somebody else is out there doing it as well. So feel free to contact me directly at happyoasis.com, and then the Uncivilized book as well. But I'm not really selling or promoting anything these days, which is really fun. I'm simply being free and loving being with friends and just loving celebrating life, co-creating, and being inspired.
Well, thank you so much.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening today. I really hope you're enjoying the podcast so far. I know I'm enjoying doing all these interviews and getting out there on the podcast world as a podcaster. And I just want to ask you guys a favor. If you could just take a minute today to rate and review this podcast, it would really help me to get enough ratings to be able to be recognized. And if I get enough ratings, I can be on New and Noteworthy, which is an awesome place to be because more people will find this podcast. And really my mission is to help people to find more joy in their life, to help the world just become a happier, more fun place to live. So I really hope that you enjoyed it, and I look forward to creating more and bringing you more and more of these types of interviews and also just solo talks from me about different topics. So if you have anything you want to share with me, please feel free to message me. And you can just send those emails to purejoyplanet@gmail.com. And also for my courses, online, free recipes, and any in-person events I'm doing, just go to purejoyplanet.com and become part of our mailing list. I'll see you next time.